I have so many thoughts about Stargate Universe. The first season is really thematically solid. Like, they definitely made some questionable plot choices, and they didn't always know what to do with their characters at times. For example, Chloe was just completely useless, and she really didn't have to be. Like, I will never understand why they didn't have TJ start to train her as a medic. I thought they were going to, because there were a few instances where Chloe was essentially assisting with various medical procedures, even in just really, really small ways, but they ultimately didn't go in that direction. Anyway, the first season has a very strong overarching plot. There's the continuous struggle to survive, as well as their efforts to figure out where they are and try to find a way home. But in season 2, things started to, I don't want to say fall apart, but there definitely wasn't that same structure as season 1. It was less cohesive.
Discovering the true nature of Destiny's mission.
You've had control of this ship the whole time!
Evolution Alliance is planning an attack on Earth.
I killed Riley. There is no mission other than getting these people home. Was never even going home. Seems you were there, and then you were here.
There's hundreds of these things. There's no way we're gonna be able to shoot them all down.
How's that damage report going?
I'm supposed to be back to normal.
The SGU showrunners knew that they needed to shake things up for season 2. So they basically just started throwing intergalactic spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. This resulted in some really interesting concepts that may not have been entirely thought out.
What if they're dying again? In order.
So some of my strongest SGU opinions are about season 2. One storyline I really liked. Another storyline I started out really liking, and then it became entirely pointless. And one storyline that fortunately just lasted a single episode made me so mad I started yelling at the TV. My neighbor probably thought that I was having a fight. So it is time that we talk about Season 2, Episode 14, entitled Hope. In this episode, Dr. Volker begins to feel ill, and they discover that he is currently experiencing end-stage renal disease, i.e. kidney failure. And TJ says,
On Earth, the next step would be dialysis. The only other option for treatment would be a transplant.
And since there are no dialysis machines in space, a kidney transplant it is. Okay, look, I understand suspension of disbelief. And in a science fiction television show, there is a lot that I can just roll with. But I draw a hard line at the kidney transplant.
I have never liked hospitals or doctors. Well, this is not a hospital. TJ is no doctor.
Like, this is a complex surgery that takes a team of highly trained surgeons. And TJ was just one person doing a transplant directly from a living donor into the waiting patient. Like, that is insane. Even with the knowledge from the ancient database, a single medic, not even a surgeon, a medic, would just not be able to complete this procedure. And as much as I like TJ, it's just not a one-person job. And also, the fact that both of the patients were fine? Transplanting a kidney is not like unplugging a TV and moving it across the room and plugging it in somewhere else. It is a really specific and complex surgery. And also, patients don't always reject the donor organ right away. The process can start quickly, but it takes some time for the immune system to build up a response to start attacking the organ. So even patients who receive close to an exact match will still typically take immunosuppressants for years following their surgery to reduce the risk of rejection.
Hey, TJ, there's a whole section here on stem cell-like procedure for post-op anti-rejection. It's only 176 pages.
And yes, TJ did pull bone marrow stem cells from Greer to put into Dr. Volker to help reduce the rejection risk. But at the time this episode came out, that research was brand new. And even today, clinical trials are still being conducted. And even then, within that research, stem cell treatment is used in conjunction with immunosuppressant therapy, or it's used with patients who had an exact match transplant. And there are two types of kidney donor surgery. There is one less invasive method that requires special equipment that I kind of doubt that they had. And then there's a more invasive method that involves basically cracking a rib in order to get the kidney out of there. So which one did they do? When they showed the scene before the surgery of TJ alone on the observation deck, clearly stressed, I thought that she was going to come to the difficult conclusion that she was just not skilled or experienced enough to be performing this surgery without essentially killing both patients. And knowing that she failed someone who was both a patient and a friend would be really hard on her. And then also Dr. Volker would have to deal with the knowledge that there was nothing they could do for him, and he would essentially be just dying slowly. That decision would fit more in line with the dark tone that SGU was going for, but nope. The transplant happened. Everything's fine now.
That's it, you did it.
The fact that there were 2 decent matches aboard this ship of, 80 people? That is statistically improbable. Even siblings have only a 25% chance of being an exact match and a 50% chance of being a half match. So even direct, full-blooded siblings have only a 50% chance of having 3 out of 6 antigens, but these 2 strangers on a spaceship had 4 out of 6. The odds of someone outside of your direct family in this small group of people being enough of a match that you could confidently proceed with the transplant surgery without immunosuppressant drugs, it's just very unlikely. Donor chains are a common thing for a reason.
The two of you both have a 4 antigen match with Dr. Volker, which is surprisingly good considering.
Also, kidney failure is not something that just happens suddenly. This would have been building for years. Dr. Volker would have been symptomatic for a very long time. Also, kidney disease is something that you can test for in routine blood work. GFR is part of a full metabolic panel, which the military almost certainly would have done. So this should not have come as a surprise. By the way, in an earlier episode, Dr. Dale Volker says that he is 34 years old.
Dr. Dale Volker, I'm 34 years old.
He's 34 and he's on high blood pressure medication and experiencing end-stage renal disease. He must have a serious underlying health condition, except that if he did, there is no way the military would have let him off-world. It drives me crazy when shows that are in the fantasy or science fiction genre pull in a very real-world concept and then thoroughly botch the execution of it. Like, there are things like the communication stones, which don't make sense to me, but are so clearly a science fiction element that is designed to be well beyond my understanding. So I just accept that they work the way the show is telling me that they work. And Chloe's weird alien blood has healing properties. Sure, why not? I mean, I am not familiar with any alien blood properties, so it could work that way. I cannot confirm or deny this. But kidney transplant? You can Google kidney transplants and find out how they work. Totally different genre and audience here, but the CW show Legacies has a bunch of witches and vampires and magic, and that's all fine. I can accept all of their weird lore. But this school also has a therapist who provides mandatory counseling for the students and the teachers. And she later begins dating one of the teachers who is also her patient. That is seriously unethical. It is a breach of both trust and professionalism. Like, give me all of the weird hybrid, tribrid, magic mythology that you want to have within your show. But when you bring in this very real world profession and casually show a circumstance where this character should be losing their license and also prosecuted in both criminal and civil court, I just get really frustrated by this. So the kidney transplant was basically just part of SGU's intergalactic spaghetti method of coming up with storylines. I mean, this one didn't entirely work, but some of the things that they came up with in season 2 were pretty interesting. I really liked the Novus storyline, even though I was hoping for just a little bit more from it. And the storyline about Destiny's mission, which was essentially to find God, was really fascinating, even if it didn't entirely go anywhere.
This ship was launched to solve a mystery, not by arriving at some ultimate destination where all the questions are answered at one time, but by accumulating knowledge bit by bit.
I will point out that our expectations of television have evolved a lot over the past decade. TV shows used to be very episodic, very monster of the week. A lot of the storylines never really advanced the overall plot of the show. Like, things never really changed much from season to season. But over the past couple of years, we've come to really appreciate season-long arcs or really well thought out twists that had clues planted far in advance. And I think that SGU kind of hit right during that transition of expectations. And the show tried to do these very long overarching plots, but the showrunners didn't entirely think things out ahead of time. And that is not speculation on my part. One of the showrunners, Joseph Malazzi, wrote on his blog that if SGU had been picked up for season 3, they had no idea how they were going to resolve the cliffhanger from season 2. They just knew someone had to stay outside the pods, and they thought it would be kind of cool and make sense if it were Eli. So that's what they wrote, but they did it without a resolution in mind. And that type of storytelling used to work when TV was more episodic and you didn't really need to think ahead more than an episode or two. But all things considered, SGU probably should have waited about 2 years before beginning production, considering how people felt after the ending of Stargate Atlantis, and the fact that SGU wanted to do something so different from the rest of the franchise. I think they really would have benefited from that time. It would have fixed a lot of their problems. I know that I just went really hard about a very minor storyline from one episode of Stargate Universe, although they do bring it up at one point in the later episode when they find out how their alternate selves lived out the rest of their lives. They mention that Dr. Volker died of what was presumably kidney failure. Anyway, share in the comments below what your favorite Stargate Universe plotline was, or what your least favorite was, because sometimes the least favorite are more fun to discuss. You know, I think it's a lot easier to put together videos that are critical of one specific component of the Stargate franchise or one specific storyline because I like Stargate as a whole. I think that the 3 TV series have a lot that they've done right. And if I was to try to sit and talk about all of it, it would be just all over the place and it would take forever. As opposed to, I didn't like this one episode. I really, really, really didn't like it, but it was just one episode and I can talk about it in a condensed time frame. And I do worry, like, I don't want to have the type of personality where I'm talking negatively about so many things, especially things that I like overall. But man, couldn't they have just spent a little bit more time Googling kidney transplants? I would have appreciated the effort.